So like you say, the stakeholders, there's going to be resistance to coming into a program. And if it's not mandated, which for a lot of companies they'd say culturally we don't mandate stuff, um, that's got to feel like a mountain to climb for a lot of people. So you're controlling the program. You can see it totally makes sense. How did you approach those interactions? How did you arrange to speak to people? How did you how did you get to the root cause of that, and how did you move it forward?
Yeah, so a lot of it's very similar to sourcing, right? It's like kind of category management. And if you think about, so as a sourcing category leader, I took the view of more of the long game, right? You need to build the relationship, right? Because sourcing wasn't mandated at any company I've been at. It's using sourcing wasn't mandated. So it's about building that relationship and proving your value, right? So if I go into a meeting and I don't understand the business need and what they're trying to solve, I can say all day long, well, sourcing, using Twilio versus bandwidth is going to save you, $5 million. They're going to be like, well, we don't care about $5 million. We care about the service that we're trying to provide. Will the 5 million that $5 million pay for it, right? So you've got to really understand what is the outcome. It's not necessarily the cost savings should be an output of what you're doing, right? It shouldn't be the reason why. Procurement, finance, your CFO, your CPOs, they're very concerned about reducing costs, right? Especially in procurement because it's 100% save versus like on the sales side. If you sell $1 million, well, you're really only making about $200,000 more, right? Or however much it is. So it's really building that relationship and having that conversation to say, okay, well, what are you trying to solve for? What does that business need? And how do I enable it, right? And are there ways to influence and do that through our category sourcing, through preferred suppliers that we already have, or is this potentially an RFX event that we need to have because you were talking about a $5 million purchase? Do we necessarily want to use a legacy provider that we've been using who has okay performance but is hit or miss, right? So that was the take I took with growing the program. One, you do your typical, let me pull everything out of our financial system to see what is our discretionary spend versus non-discretionary, what's actually already being captured within the system, where do we have large user groups that are already, one, potentially using the vendor management for the MSP or the VMS for other services, so like staff augmentation, but they're not using it for services procurement. So really identifying those areas and then just reaching out. Honestly, I like people want to talk. They want to talk about what they're doing. They want to tell you about what they're doing, right? So part of it is probably company culture. It's very open company culture of like, hey, reach out, support, learn more about each other, the company. So that's one of the things I did at Cox is it's just like did a roadshow one of what our services are, just in general across our higher spend category areas and those leaders, and then just started really diving into what are the problems you're solving here? What are you trying to, you've got, as a category across 20 suppliers, you've got $100 million in spend. What is your thought process of not bringing it into the system, right? Because from a systemic purpose, we can give you the visibility, we can give you the granularity of this, of the spend, the people, the tracking. We take all of that transactional burden off of you, right? So you could focus on the strategic. You don't have to do POs anymore, right? We're a white glove MSP, VMS provider. They will come in, they will create the POs. You would just have to come in, do the final approvals, right? So is really diving into the just dissecting what is their fear. And a big portion of it was the control that I mentioned earlier. Then there was the fear that costs were going to go up. That was one of the biggest fears. Well, my budget's already so lean. If we put it through the VMS, they're going to charge me more. And I'm like, well, no, yeah, this is what our procurement team is for, right? Like this is why our procurement function exists. Is we make sure that doesn't happen, so that they're not passing any cost back to you. Part of the conversation is also with the suppliers. If say, let's say it's a new supplier that doesn't go through the VMS, talking about the benefits to them as well going through, because there aren't just benefits of you know us as stakeholders going through. There's also supplier benefits, right? Same thing. They get paid in a timely manner. Any escalations are resolved pretty much immediately, right? Any concerns. So they're not waiting on that business stakeholder to review and approve. They've got a system in place that's ensuring that, one, they're invoicing timely, that they're processing their invoice or getting their time in, and then also making sure that it is flowing through that entire end-to-end process quickly.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you talk about the kind of the fear side of it and the process side of it.
Yeah.
It all comes down to change, really, doesn't it? It's, humans are wired to be wary of change. Um, but I think you've touched on a point that I've heard quite a few kind of procurement visionaries, I would call them, people who are very kind of, future focused and progressive in the procurement function. One of the big things, as you mentioned, that many people mention is understand the business. Procurement has to really understand the strategy of the business and where it's trying to go, because then you can operate as a facilitator. So you're then in the business saying, look, to the stakeholder, what is it you need to do? And we were talking earlier about people being concerned about their budgets. Ultimately, it's not a vanity metric. They're thinking, I need to get my work done. I need to have the money to be able to do the things I need to do. So there is the right sort of intention is behind that concern. But actually understanding the business, understanding the stakeholder, what they need to do, that is all about making the business more effective and allowing that business to compete in the market, and be successful against its competitors. So all of these things, like you say, building that relationship and having that conversation, they open up all these benefits, which initially there's resistance to. And as I say, if I think back to sitting on a kind of round table looking at where's services procurement now and where's it going in the future, what's holding the market back. These are all the things that come up, aren't they? People are in procurement, either they don't feel empowered or they don't feel they've got the business case or the drivers. But one of the big things that they feel is holding them back is just like, how the hell am I going to get the organization to change? So just what was that journey like in terms of, let's think back to some, you don't have to, let's not name any names, but if you think about some of the stakeholders that were really challenged this and were really against it to start with, what kind of brought them round? How did you get them over the hurdle?
So a lot of it really it boiled down to small proof of concepts in
Right.
some cases, um, which we're fortunate, right? I mean, if you already have a vendor management system in place, it makes it easier to say, hey, let's run a one SOW through, right? If you don't have something like a VMS in place or like Zivio, like an SPS, that becomes a more difficult conversation. Um, but no, like for me, it was very much of you know, talking to the fear, saying, okay, your fear is lack of control of the supplier. You think that the MSP is going to control it. Not the case. And here's why. Here's what the MSP does. They don't take the actual strategic management conversations that you're having. They enable those through just the tracking of work that you're having. They're able to report on it. Here's examples. Leveraged existing business units, right? So I had the benefit of being across three large corporate entities, right, that were all falling under Cox Enterprises. Well, similar businesses, right? All right, well, look here at Cox Communications, the tech team is using them for these services, right? So Cox Automotive, look, we can very much say, your fear is prices will go up. Well, look over here. No, we actually were able to, run an RFP from a procurement standpoint. Prices went down, right? And you could even leverage these same prices we have because we're now centralized into a COE. Or if you want to select your own suppliers, we can do a very similar thing. That the percentage, because it was a supplier funded model, does not get passed back to you, right? And here's the kind of the proof that we can show that it's already being done on this side. That was actually one of the bigger concerns is that, well, your percent fee is going to get, they're just going to increase my cost by that percent. So we were able to really address that concern just with existing examples within the program. Um, but then the second piece was a lot of it was that control. Like we're going to lose control of the suppliers, yeah, and we won't have that direct relationship. And we're able to say we were able to show, you know, the MSP actually, from a strategic perspective, does not manage those suppliers. Your strategic suppliers are still your strategic suppliers. Like if we wanted to build the function out for the MSP to do that, we could, but that wasn't the direction we took. Our MSP was more of an enabling function. We also had a sourcing team that we built to help on the indirect sourcing side as well. So we had a team of about 8 to 9 people that were actually doing negotiations on our behalf. But it wasn't the vendor management piece, right? Like the strategic management of the vendors. It was just that tactical management.